Hey guys, welcome back to the PowerShot YouTube channel. So, we're back with this 2017 Silverado, and we were going to start out with some power mods, but I was thinking this truck looked a little ugly with how far it leaned forward. Even towing the boat, it still was raked forward. So, yesterday I installed this new Eibach set of springs and shocks. So you had to compress the coils to swap out everything. But I have not done the driver's side, and that's what I'm going to show you guys today. So right now, the driver's side's off the ground, still all stock. And the truck's sitting basically level. As you can see, there's about that much of a difference before and after you do the lift. Alright, so your lug nuts are 22 millimeter to get the wheel off. Once we get in here, yesterday I started by taking off the wheel speed sensor bracket and brake line bracket. It's a 10 millimeter socket, and then up here you have this little red tab on the clip. So I'll grab a screwdriver. So this red tab here needs to slide up like that, and then that black piece below it gets depressed. So one thing I did not mention is I found out yesterday it was a lot easier after I sprayed all the bolts with WD-40. So I sprayed them all yesterday, but I'll give them all a quick spray today. So now we have this bracket off and our line disconnected. We can try and get our sway bar link disconnected. Alright, that was actually definitely easier than yesterday. So, that was a 15 millimeter socket. And the nut on the top was also 15 millimeter. Okay, so once you've got your upper ball joint bolt almost all the way out, you want to leave that nut on there, because you don't want to hit the threads with the hammer. So what needs to be done is this upper knuckle that it gets bolted to. When you shock it a few times, your upper ball joint should pop out. If it doesn't, there's a tool called a pickle fork here that you'll slide in here, and you tap the back of it, and that should pick it up. I wonder why it's not coming loose. I'm going to go ahead and remove this tie rod, and maybe that'll free it up. That was a 21 millimeter. Okay, so now that we finally got this upper ball joint out, it's gonna be time to order a set of upper control arms because that boot is shot. Let's work on getting these bolts out of the strut. Okay, so we are taking off these electrical clips off the top of the studs on the strut. Okay, now we're going to be using a 18mm socket to take off the 3 studs on the top of the strut. The one thing you want to keep note of is which stud was in the front, because these look like they're evenly spaced apart, but they're not. And I learned that yesterday. So all of this, just marking a line down it so we know what the front was, to make life a little bit easier when it goes back together. All right, so now we're gonna take off these 2 lower bolts. All right, so those are 2 15mm bolts. Once we do that, the strut will slide out the bottom. You can see we got these tightened down and we have this loose. You'll tell once the rubber and everything kind of starts to separate. So what you do next is you'll have to hold that stud in the center of the shop and bust that nut loose with a wrench. Once you undo that, this whole upper assembly is going to slide out, and then you can relieve the tension slowly and evenly with the impact. And there's a few parts you have to save. So your top half of your strut with the studs, see how we marked that? Well, it's going to come in handy when you go to reassemble it. So we have that. Let me see. The part that sits on this rubber boot, this plate that goes right here to protect the end of the shock, this bottom plate that holds the spring from shooting down, and you'll see that we have this extra piece right here on this shock. Well, we go ahead and we pull apart this bump stop. It actually sits right here inside of it. So before we get ahead of ourselves, let's swap that out. That's it. This just presses right back in here. I just push and spin. All right. So, first part in reassembling this is keep in mind that angle there. It's just a bushing, but it is very hard to turn. I found this yesterday. So you'll see how that's angled right now. Well, the way we're holding it will make it easier to go back in with the angle of our control arm. If we put it this way, well, the control arm is going to be angled that way, and it's not going to want to go back in. So we'll make this our front. So we got the front of our shock marked. Now we have this ring set to the lowest point for 2.5 inches of lift because we're using Eibach springs. We'll slide their ring down, and then we'll slide this bottom, we'll call it a saddle, that will hold the bottom of our spring. And then we're going to slide this little rubber, well, plastic piece down on top of that. Okay. Once we do that, we're going to slide this piece on to protect our shock. We'll slide our bump stop on. Okay. And now we'll work on getting this spring compressed. So try to align this spring with the way the old one sat. So you can see that little divot there where the old one sat. You can see our front mark and where that old one ended. So we're going to try to compress this spring in a way that we're not going to have to struggle to put it back together. Set this other one directly across from it. We're just gonna compress it evenly, and as you do it, you want to try to watch the spring, make sure it's not kinking either way, and it stays relatively straight. You can see our mark on the front of our shock. So we center that up, and we're going to try to align it with that mark right there. So as you can tell, our stud's still not sticking through, so we'll have to compress this a little bit more, and we're going to be using the new supplied nut that came with the shocks. Check that out, we got our threads showing. So we'll hurry up and get the nut on there. Okay, so now that you have your top nut on, your studs aligned with this stripe on the middle of your shock, what I found yesterday when I did not have it aligned perfectly was I took a pipe wrench and I grabbed the base of the shock, and you could twist it a little bit and you get it lined up. So trying to teach you guys from my mistakes. Alright, so we got this guy pretty much lined up. Once we put it in the truck, we're going to align these 3 studs at the top of our strut tower with the 3 nuts on. We can just snug them up, a couple threads, and then we'll start to get our bottom bolts in. Follow up, the GoPro battery died, and I got a couple things done. I got the sway bar bolt started, and I had the jack underneath the lower control arm. I had to use this bolt, kind of beat it in a little bit, didn't mess up the threads, and use the pipe wrench to straighten this the rest of the way. Once I got that straight, this guy dropped in to align these 2 bolts, and now I can tighten up this this one here, then put the new clip, the clip from our old shocks back on the new ones, and tighten up this bottom bolt. Once that's done, we'll tighten up our 3 bolts on top. As you can tell, I just have them hand started right here, so the strut didn't drop out. So I think now we're at the hardest part of the whole project, and that is getting this upper ball joint back in this knuckle. Due to this spring being so tight, when you try to jack up your lower control arm, it'll actually start to pick your truck up from your jack. There's no give whatsoever. Maybe actually like 1/4 of an inch, but you will have to pry down very hard. If you have aftermarket upper control arms, it might not be as bad because it relocates your ball joint. So I'm gonna go ahead and fight with that and get that done, and I'll check back in with you. All right, so we got our tie rod bolted back up. We got our upper control arm bolt bolted down, and that is tight. All we have left is to tighten up our sway bar end link and put our tire back on. All right, so everything's bolted back up, wheels bolted on. Our jack's out of there. Double checked everything to make sure everything was tight. Still a little drop test. All right, Arctic mug has passed the test. All right, let's see. It definitely looks way better. I can't wait to drive it. Let's check out this alignment. Definitely will need to be realigned. That one looks slightly toe in, and so does this one. So definitely not going to drive the truck very much until it gets realigned. It'll also get new tires here soon. Alright, so we're finally finished with the leveling kit. I did the rear shocks as well. I didn't video them because they're fairly simple. You just jack the truck up from the frame and try to give your axle as much travel as possible to make it easier putting the shocks in. But here we are. So it is significantly higher. I know that the ground is angled a little bit. Before, it actually had a true 2.5-inch rake in the front, and now I think it's sitting slightly high in the front. I was thinking about adding a 1-inch block, but if it does okay towing the boat, then I won't put it on, and it doesn't squat too bad. I just don't want it to look like one of those Carolina trucks. I'm definitely happy with it. I can't wait to drive it and see how it does. So everyone always asks, what are the final heights of the truck? And how does it ride after the suspension settles. So I just took it and romped it over as many huge bumps and down some dirt roads, and we ended up with 38 7/8 in the front and 38 in the rear. So we're about 7/8 higher in the front, and I was thinking about putting that 1-inch block in, and that should take care of it. I might even go slightly higher, just still depending on how the truck does. But yeah, I mean, everything seems okay. The truck definitely needs to be aligned though. So if you guys are going to be doing this yourselves, I would definitely get a set of hands, extra set of hands to help you out doing it. But yep, till the next video.